powerful unit. What I'd like to mention real briefly is the compressor limiter. A lot of people use the compressor limiter in the live setting, and I don't advocate its use because if you're not familiar with what a compressor limiter does, it's a dynamic range limiter. It pretty much makes your lowest notes in volume louder and makes your loudest notes a little quieter, and it kind of compresses the signal. But what it does is, I think it squashes the sound, and well, that's actually exactly what it does, but I haven't found a compressor limiter yet that doesn't negatively impact your tone. And I prefer to use my hands and just be sensitive and subtle with the dynamic range on my hands and use that instead of a compressor limiter pedal. That way, if there's that one note that I'm really trying to let speak, and I just want to lay into it a little bit, I have it there. It's not that I've got something clamping down to where I can't even do a transient note that's up there in that range. Okay, but experiment around with the use of effects. I think you'll find that it's a really fun thing to be able to apply to that canvas and just communicate even more with your instrument. I definitely hope that you find the concepts and ideas and exercises we've gone over today really help you develop as a musician and just help your effectiveness as part of a worship band. At this point, let's briefly talk about some issues of the heart. Obviously, we're talking about music ministry and leading God's people in worship. That's a huge deal. As a musician, there really isn't a higher calling because we're playing music that has eternal significance. It has eternal significance inherently, right? If you're somebody that God's called to the worship ministry, there comes with that a huge responsibility. We have a responsibility to constantly evaluate and reevaluate and ensure that God's on the throne of our lives. If we go and play Christian on Sunday and then spend the rest of the week living self-absorbed and carnal lives, then that's not happening. There's no room for that. That's not to say that if you blow it during the week, then you better hang up your bass, no ministry for you. I mean, we're obviously all grace cases, and that's one of the cool things about the Lord. But I want to encourage you, and I want to remind myself to, the bottom line with authentic Christianity is not rules and regulations, but it's a relationship with God. So let's just always remind ourselves to take our relationship with the Lord seriously and just constantly, daily invest in that. And what an honor to be somebody that He's sort of handpicked to direct the eyes of the church to Him. That's the coolest thing ever. And the fact of the matter is that God can make happening bass players out of mulch. So, let's walk humbly with our God, as the Scripture says. And, there's no room for the rock star mentality in the worship ministry. So, enough said. As you're one of the main foundational components for your team musically, I encourage you to be one of the main foundational components of your team in terms of interpersonal things, loving and honoring and encouraging and serving the other members of the team. It's amazing what God does with that whole koinonia thing with a group. I was in a ministry team for years with people that ended up being my closest friends, and there's really it has to be experienced. It's just an awesome thing. Follow the leader of the team as well. Be somebody that is an absolute pillar for the leader of that team, as well as the rest of the team, so that they would know that spiritually and musically and in every other way, we're there. We're totally there as the foundation and just a solid, reliable part of the team. And that this house ain't moving. The foundation's there. This house ain't moving. So just relax and enter in. Cool? Thanks for joining me for this first volume
grace and love have set us free. On the path set before us, for your grace and love, make us stand on your word. By your hand we will not falter, for the blood of the Lamb has set me free, free indeed. We will walk in your home, on the path set before us, for your grace and love have set us free. For your grace and love set us free. For your grace and love have set us free.
Hi, welcome to Grace Case Studios, i.e. my home studio. And I just wanted to talk to you briefly about tone, and specifically technique for tone. Bass players are notorious for being on a never-ending quest for tone, and that's good. It's good to have the best gear and you know, just be setting yourself up for success in that regard. But one of the things that I found really helpful is evaluating your technique specifically before you go out and buy a $5,000 preamp, and see if there's anything in your technique that may help you get a warmer tone. Check this out. I've had students before who sort of, as with fingerstyle playing, they would pluck the strings in a trajectory, if you will, that was pretty much at 90-degree angles to the string, or if nothing else, maybe even upwards. It was almost like a pluck. And I found that it's really helpful to get more bottom end and warmth in the bass tone, to basically envision a trajectory more along these lines, where you're basically trying to pull or push the string really through the body up into your chest. Check this out. Listen to the difference in tone, and it's kind of hard to tell this over a TV speaker, but if you try it on your own, you'll see what I'm talking about. This is sort of an upward motion, or sideways, 90-degree angle, and this is down. So, versus this, where you're plucking with the fleshy part of your fingers. Experiment around with that and see if you can maybe save yourself about $5,000 on a preamp by just changing the angle at which you attack the strings. Hi, welcome back to Grace Case Studios. I wanted to just briefly share with you my present travel system. I used to be one of those people that would carry the gig bag on the plane and have a knot in my stomach the whole time, wondering if an overzealous gate agent was going to tell me to check my bag, which that happened on numerous occasions. So I learned from my mistakes. And my present system I'm really happy with. Basically, it involves an SKB keyboard case, and what I do is I load everything in this thing. I've got my effect pedals. There's an effect pedal in there wrapped in a cloth that I use for wiping my strings as well. I've got my AC adapters, which, by the way, these little Velcro ties that you can get at your hardware store. Very cool. They keep cords intact. In addition, I have a power strip. I've got my cables, strings, and I also have my bass in its gig bag, which I can then, when I get to the venue, I can take my gig bag out and not have to cart this thing around. In the pocket here, I have alcohol for rubbing down my strings, hopefully getting another few minutes of bright tone out of them. I've got my strap. I have a Ziploc bag that has some tools in it, as well as directions from Michael on which direction I'm supposed to turn the truss rod in those emergencies. I am not a techie. But, and then in this pocket up here, I have my tuner and a can of fingeries as well. And then I also have, obviously, my MTD 535 in the gig bag. It's important to make sure that you have the bass in there. It's a drag to have everything else and not the bass. So anyway, once I get that all done, then I put the bass and the gig bag in the case. And like I said, you just close this up, lock it, seal it. This has wheels, so you can just cart it around the airport. You check it. You don't have to worry about anything, and you can just have peace of mind as you see it falling off the conveyor belt at the bottom of the baggage handling area. That it's a flight case, man. It can handle it. Look at all this padding. Honestly, I have never had a problem in about 7 years of heavy travel with this case, and frankly, it looked about this beat up after my first road trip. So I encourage you to check that out. It's a cool system. I really like it.